talk about, and we're going to go position by position, get you ready for Arizona against USC and UCLA. Without any further ado, let's get started here on Locked On Wildcats.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for keeping it Locked On Wildcats. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, we got a lot to get to this show, but first, Arizona football reels in a big commitment from Jordan Washington out of Long Beach, Jordan. Pardon the pun right there. This is obviously a big time move right here. We've got when you're talking about Arizona, when they're always going to look for speed in the backfield, and they got it. Now, again, he's a little undersized, but you know what? When you're a little bit undersized, that's not the worst thing in the world. So, especially when you've got players who can do what Jordan Washington can do. Now, you look at him, you look at his tape, there's a lot to like about him. Jed Fish has talked about wanting to be fast, wanting to get speed, and the one thing about this guy is that he's fast and he is speedy. So he is, again, there's a lot to like about him. And it just goes to show you, too, Jed Fish's overall recruiting aspect, or recruiting that he can get, basically who he needs out of California. I think a lot of times people are wondering, they're like, well, is Jed Fish really that, is Jed Fish, how is he able to recruit? Will he be able to sustain it? Yes, he's going to be able to sustain it, because the more you win, the more you're able to get better players out there. And so, again, it's going to be fun to watch what he continues to do. Another kid, though, that I wanted to talk a little bit about that we haven't talked a ton about, but very much worth the praise would be right here. Genesis Smith. Now, you might say to yourself, who's Genesis Smith? Well, I'm glad you asked. Genesis Smith is a guy who, out of Chandler High School, who has seen his recruiting skyrocket up the ratings. He is now viewed as a high 3-star. I personally believe he's even better than that. I think he's a guy who is probably more of in that 4-star range, something like that. But he's also incredibly talented. We look at that safety spot. The one thing about the safety spot, and we've talked about this, the one thing about the safety spot is that you're going to need multiple guys out there to be able to do what you need. And Isaiah Taylor is going to be one of those players. And yes, Isaiah Taylor is one of those guys for sure. But you also need to look at it and say that Arizona is kind of at the stage right now where you watch them and you're like, well, all right, as long as you keep winning, good things will probably continue to happen. And when good things continue to happen, you're going to get even more players. Plus, let's not act like Jed Fish signing was not signing an extension was not a reason to make this even easier, because quite frankly, it is a reason to make it easier, because again, if you want to go play for the head man, like what Washington did, or like Genesis Smith, you want that to be happening with a coach that is going to be there. So again, now let's talk a little bit now about where Arizona goes from here with basketball. And again, was a little bit remiss on it in that wanted to get some Arizona football in there, but now we got to talk some Arizona basketball. And with Arizona basketball, the elephant in the room is this LA trip coming up right here. With the LA trip, there's a lot of things that you need to know. But again, it's not the LA trip. It's the trip from the LA schools coming to Tucson. So let's talk about USC. I'm a fan, as many of you know. I like what Andy Enfield does. I think Andy Enfield is I think Andy Enfield does a very, very good job at getting the kind of talent in that he needs and getting in the kind of perimeter players and the length that he needs. There's certainly a template. There's a method to his madness, and I like it. I'm a big fan of it. He's not the greatest X's and O's guy in the world. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that he is, but he does a pretty good job. He does a pretty good job in the grand scheme of things. And USC is coming into town with some interesting situations right here. First, you've got to look at it and you got to say, all right, who are the guys that you really need to keep an eye on? And the players that you really, really need to keep an eye on is, first of all, Drew Peterson. Now, Drew Peterson feels like he's been around forever. He hasn't, but it does feel like he's been around forever. He's about 6'10", can really handle the ball. Pretty good dribbler as well. Makes really, really good decisions. And, obviously he's a guy that you got to like. You got to be a big fan of. I'm a big fan of Drew Peterson. I think that he can do a lot of stuff. Now, who's Arizona going to put on him? That's going to be interesting because he's probably a little bit too quick for Tubelis, a little bit too big for Larson. I'm guessing, though, and this is just a guess, I'm guessing that Tubelis gets that first try at it, but we'll see. It also depends on what kind of lineup that USC goes with. And then after that, you got Boogie Ellis. I like Boogie Ellis. He has taken somewhat of a circuitous route to Arizona, but the one thing about it, though, is that, to USC, he can drop points. Arizona would love to have Boogie Ellis, quite frankly. I would love to have Boogie Ellis because Boogie Ellis is good. We like good players there, and he's a guy that can break you down off the dribble, score. He's really stepped up this year. He's a guy to keep an eye on. And then lining up next to him is going to be Reese Waters-Dixon at about 6'3" or 4", kid out of California. He was originally a highly rated player and then kind of, took a little bit of a backseat and, ended up signing with SC, obviously, but it was a good move. Signing there because he can put the ball in the basket and he's become more and more efficient. And that's always what you like to see out of players like that is what are their efficiency levels? Can they become more efficient? And if they become more efficient, can you win with them? Waters-Dixon has shown that. Then after that, you got guys like Trey White. You've got Kobe Johnson. You got Big Vince Uichukwu, who we just need to talk about it really quickly. USC next year figures to be absolutely loaded because you've got the best player in the country coming in at the point guard spot. And after that, you can return pretty much all of these players except Drew Peterson. Maybe Boogie Ellis leaves, but if Boogie Ellis leaves, you totally understand it because you're replacing him with Isaiah Collier, who is the best player in the country. That is, that's a pretty impressive little thing right there. Now, let's talk now a little bit about Let's talk a little bit about UCLA and what this one would mean. But I do expect Arizona to beat USC, and a big reason that I expect Arizona to beat USC is because I just don't think that Andy Enfield is a great X's and O's coach. I think that he's a guy that do some decent things. It also can come to a limitation at times, and I expect Arizona to be fully motivated, and that is a big part of it. When you're fully motivated, that can make a big difference. So I expect Arizona to beat USC. Now, you might say to yourself, Mike, I'd like to bet on this game. I don't think you're a total idiot. Where would you go? Where should I go to bet on this game? You know where you go to bet on this game? BetOnline, the BetOnline sportsbook. Check it out. Find all the latest news, scores, you name it. BetOnline sportsbook has got it. Lots of really good stuff right there, and it's easy. How many times do you get people that are like, I don't know, this is this is more difficult to use or whatever the case may be. I'm a big fan of it. Nobody says that about the BetOnline Sportsbook because it works. Check it out, BetOnline Sportsbook. We'll be right back with you. We're going to start breaking down UCLA next. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, we've got now let's talk about UCLA. UCLA is one of the 5, 6, 7 best teams in the country, and there's a lot of reason to feel that way, mainly because they're very good. So, all right, just a rehash of who is on UCLA's roster at this point. You've got first. You got Tiger Campbell. We all know who Tiger Campbell is. He has been a thorn in the side of Pac-12 people for many, many years, and he's going to continue to be. He's good, though. You like Tiger Campbell. You like him as your point guard. He's also a leader of men, as some might say. Then lining up next to him, you got David Singleton and Jalen Clark. Both a little bit different. David Singleton, Bailey also hops in there as well. They're both kind of the same player, even though they play totally differently. Their imp's about the same. Amari Bailey, very good athlete. David Singleton, guy that can, is basically just a three-point shooter. That's who you got there. Will McClendon hops in there from time to time. Then at the small forward position, you got Jalen Clark. Jalen Clark might be the most improved player in the entire conference. And not only might he be the most important player in the entire conference or the most improved, he also might be the best defensive player. That's how good he is. That's going to be a tough matchup for whoever he puts or UCLA puts on Arizona. Good luck with that. Then after that, you got Jaime Jaquez at the power forward spot. He's kind of everybody knows who he is by this point. He's kind of a jack of all trades type. You like him. I'm a big fan of Jaime Jaquez. If you were to tell me that he's going to be the conference player of the year, I would disagree with you because I would go with the Tubelis, but I can certainly see the rationale in going with him because, again, he's a very, very good basketball player. And he's very clutch as well, which I think is an underrated aspect when it comes to players, to what you're looking at. You can't just go by the stats when you look at a player like that. You got to look at everything because there are a lot of times there's more to it than just that. All right. Now, we're going to get to their front court here in just a second, but we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with you. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats. I'm your host, Mike Luke. Now, we talked about Jaime Jaquez and how important he is for what UCLA wants to do. Now, let's talk about the front court, or, the postmen. And there's only one. There's Bona. Bona is a fantastic athlete. He can run the floor. He can block shots. He's a very good basketball player. Don't get me wrong about any of that. But that's essentially it for UCLA. Now, you can say, you know what, they go small, and you would be more than apt in saying that Arizona should be able to beat them up there. Arizona should be able to beat them up there. But, again, we've seen in times that Arizona has struggled with teams with athleticism, and this might just be another situation like that. We're going to have to take a wait-and-see approach. But overall, I'm fairly bullish on Arizona this weekend. I do believe that the Cats are going to sweep UCLA, and I do believe they're going to sweep UCLA and USC and get right back into that top 5 range. When you get right back into that that top 10 range, and maybe everybody looks past this past weekend as a little bit of, just kind of a one-off, for lack of a better term. But again, a little bit of a shorter pod today. We'll be back with you 20 plus minutes tomorrow. But as always, really appreciate you all listening to Locked On Wildcats, Arizona SC, Arizona UCLA. Then you got Genesis Smith and you got Jordan Washington, who committed to the Cats. So there's a lot to really like about what's going on right now. But as always, we will be back with you tomorrow. Thanks so much. You have been listening to Locked On Wildcats.